Hey everyone, Dave from BC Bushcraft. This is part 4 in my knife making videos with knife making with hand tools series. This is everything that I've done before heat treat. So here I'm just marking off my pin holes. So I just took a center punch that I had gotten and I basically just eyeballed it by putting, 2 dots with a marker type of thing on the blade. And then I just went ahead and tapped them with a center punch, and then I did my holes with a hand drill. And I will say that it's quite hard to drill the holes with a hand drill. If you have a drill press, by all means use a drill press. A drill press is a lot more accurate. You'll get obviously straighter holes and things like that, but I didn't have one available to me while doing this video. I now do have one available to me, so that's quite exciting. But regardless, I drilled out the holes for my pins with a hand drill, and it's quite hard work. It takes a while, and it didn't really go totally smoothly, but regardless, I did get the holes done, and everything worked out. So in this picture here, I only have drilled 2 holes, but at the end of the whole project, I ended up drilling multiple holes in my knife for just weight reduction pretty much. So right here I'm just kind of taking the burrs out, and instead of using a file, you can use a file or something else to do it. And I decided to draw my outline of my knife to do the handles as well in this video. So this is G10 and it cuts fairly easily. I believe that this is a coping saw that I'm using, and it was quite easy to cut the basic shape out with the saw, and basically cut it out and then marked each handle left and right, so I kind of knew which one was which in this next process. So I have my holes drilled through my actual knife blank, and now I'm going to set it up and drill the holes through the handle scales. So I just pretty much used an F-clamp and clamped it down to a piece of wood and went ahead and drilled through the white G10. With this part here, I did find it a little bit tricky to keep the hand drill totally straight. I do think that my holes are a little bit off. When I put the pins in, there's a few tiny gaps and stuff. Nothing too major, just a little bit. It's not as aesthetically, pleasing as like a perfect hole, but regardless, the pins fit in, and it should definitely do the job. So, like I said again, if you have a drill press, use a drill press. A hand drill, it's definitely the harder way to go, but it beats using bracing and bit or whatever those hand cranks are called. So. Here I'm just drilling out the second hole, and then I'm going to do the, I flipped it around and I'm going to do the other handle now. And I put the pin in place to kind of keep everything straight. I found, a lot of other videos will tell you to keep your hole straight is basically just remove the pin and put the pin back, and you should get straight holes through your knife blade and through your handles. And I did get straight holes and everything worked out pretty well, but there is a little bit of wiggle room that with the drill, because you have to put the downward pressure and you're not going to be totally perfect vertically pressing down there. It was a little bit off, but not too bad. So I just finished off my holes, and then I wanted to flatten out my handles before I glued the liners to it. So I basically made some kind of X marks lines on it with a pencil, and then just sanded on a flat surface, which happened to be glass. And this is the epoxy that I'm using, which is DevCon. I believe it's 30-minute set time, and I tried gluing my handles to liners like that and then cutting my liners out afterwards, and this did not work, and I don't suggest it. as soon as I tried to cut the liners like I am doing here, I pretty much broke the bond instantly, and I ended up having to pretty much do the process over again and glue the liners back onto the handle. But it worked out the second time I did it, and I just basically took a scalpel and scraped off some of the extra epoxy on the handle right there. So now we're on to the sanding stage, and basically before you heat treat it, it's a good idea to sand up to maybe a 220 grit, and you can kind of see my sanding set up there. I got a big C clamp that's holding down my wooden sanding arm, and then I have an F clamp holding down my actual knife, and I just have a wooden block as my sanding block, and I'm using it. It's not really Windex, it's a dollar store brand of Windex to lubricate the sanding. So here I'm sanding the bevel and trying to get rid of the file marks. It was very hard work trying to get rid of the file marks using 120 grit to do so. You can see at the tip there's still some file marks, so I had to continue to, just labor away at getting rid of those file marks. And that was the hardest part that I found about the sanding, was getting rid of my file marks. I mean, if you have a belt grinder, it's probably a little easier and you don't really have to do this stage, but I did get rid of all the file marks, which you can see here, and it's basically time to move on to sanding the kind of face of the knife. So I just used my Windex equivalent, and I was using the sandpaper that I had used on the bevel because I only used the center of that sandpaper here, so that's why I have the block turned that way to kind of just use the leftover grit of that paper, so I'm not wasting a ton of paper. And this is kind of it after 120 grit. And then from there I moved up to 220. And as a disclaimer, this is the second side of the knife. I already did the other side, and this is the second side. So I already had a general idea of what to do, and I had already worked, a few hours on the other side sanding away. So this side definitely turned out a little better and neater than the other side, as I learned kind of what works and what doesn't work. And this is my first knife, and my first knife doing it like this, so there's obviously going to be a bit of a learning curve. So there is the blade after it's been sanded to 220. And after I had done the blade and the face of the knife, I went to do the tang all the way around the spine, of the knife, and I just used the same sanding block and just tried to keep it really nice and square like you would draw filing, and I sanded it up to 220 grit as well. Also, I tried to finish part of the handle, so this is kind of what the handle looks like when it's put together, and I flattened out the top part by filing it, so you can see that it's nice and square there. And I also wanted to add a little bit of a bevel as a detail to that edge. So in the next frame here, I took it and put it into the vise with the pins in place, and basically with those pins in place you'll get like a nice uniform finish when you actually glue them onto your knife. So here I'm just filing on an angle to get kind of a bevel, and I'll do a little bit of sanding on this part too, because you can't finish this part of the knife. You can't finish this part of the knife when it's glued on. So anyways, I hope you like this video. Please like and subscribe. I'm going to post a few other videos if you guys want to watch it. And next I'll be doing the heat treat. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video too. Take care.